global news on Zuma Nigeria. We're bringing you stories from around the world and in Nigeria. And we begin with Russia threatens nuclear action as Ukraine hates munitions. Trump to meet Zelensky after Harris pledges Ukraine support. Myanmar military urges anti-coup forces to surrender and join talks. One dead as extremely dangerous Hurricane Elena hits Florida, and ex-defense minister wins Japan's ruling party to be next president. Prime Minister rather. Russia has designed its nuclear response doctrine to the specific threat of the long-range attacks it faces from Ukraine, even as Kyiv's forces demonstrated during the past week the devastating effect such attacks can have on Moscow's conventional war effort. Vladimir Putin, Russian president, recently outlined the approaches to be new of the addition of the fundamentals of state policy on nuclear weapons use, said his right-hand man, deputy head of the National Security Council, Dmitry Medvedev, on Wednesday. These threat profiles are precisely tailored to describe Ukraine, which gave up nuclear weapons in 1994, but is supported by nuclear-armed states, the United Kingdom, France, and the United States, and which has been forbidden to use Western-supplied weapons to attack deep inside Russia. Putin has said already that the use of those weapons will put Russia at war with NATO. The newest step appears to be designed to refresh the threat of a first strike. Russian officials recently said that the oft-repeated threats had grown trite with the design overuse and don't frighten anyone in the West. Ukraine has used drones of its own manufacture to hit Russian logistics hubs, and on Saturday reminded Russia of what it could achieve even without using British-supplied Storm Shadow cruise missiles and U.S.-supplied Army tactical missiles, AT attempts. Military intelligence and special forces drone operators attacked Russian ammunition depot at Tikhotetsk and Krasnodar Krai, 300 kilometers, 185 miles southeast of free Ukrainian territory, and at Troropets in Tver, 500 kilometers north of Ukraine. Ukraine's general staff projected the Tikhotetsk attack damaged 2,000 tons of munitions. Estonian intelligence chief Colonel Ants Kivelsia said the Taurus Pox attack may have cost the Russian army 3 months' worth of supplies. The Institute for the Study of War, a Washington-based think tank, said such a crowded disposition of massed material underscores the lack of operational security in Russia's rare supply depot, demonstrating the extent to which Western restrictions prohibiting Ukraine from firing Western-provided weapons into Russia has granted the Russian command flexibility to not properly protect its rare areas. Ukraine has sought to use Storm Shadows and ATACMs to hit Russian Tu-95MS and Sukhoi 35 bombers as they take off from Russian airfields to drop glide bombs on Ukrainian front lines. These are inertial bombs, retrofitted with flight surfaces and sometimes with guidance systems, have a range of 40 to 60 kilometers. Ukraine has said the only way to stop them is to shoot the planes before they release their payload. Each bomb carries between 250 kg, that's 550 pounds, and 3 tons of explosive and has a devastating effect. That was demonstrated on Monday when Russia dropped glide bombs on Zaporizhia city for the first time, destroying 14 buildings and 2 schools and wounding 21 people. Donald Trump has said he will meet Volodymyr Zelensky after condemning the Ukrainian president on the campaign trail and expressing doubts about Ukraine's ability to beat Russia. Trump, the Republican candidate in the November 5th United States presidential election, said on Friday he will meet Zelensky in New York. The announcement came just hours after U.S. President Joe Biden launched over $8 billion in fresh military aid for Kyiv, and after Vice President Kamala Harris, Trump's Democratic rival in November, met Zelensky and promised her unwavering support. Trump has questioned the scale of U.S. backing for Ukraine and at a campaign rally this week said the country should have made a deal with Russia when Moscow began its full-scale invasion in February 2022. On Thursday, he repeated his claims that he could secure a peace deal. Shortly before Trump's comments, Harris promised support for Ukraine and in a veiled reference to Trump, said those who have Ukraine swap land for peace with Russia were supporting proposals of surrender. Harris was speaking alongside Zelensky at the White House at their 7th meeting on the 3rd this year. Trump and Zelensky have not met in person since Trump's term as U.S. president ended in 2021, although they spoke on the phone in July. Trump earlier in the week looked poised to snub Zelensky's request for a meeting. The Ukrainian leader had said before traveling to New York for the annual United Nations General Assembly that he hoped to present his victory plan to win the war with Russia to Biden, Harris, and Trump. But he upset Trump's campaign after visiting a munitions factory over the weekend in the battleground state of Pennsylvania with that state's governor, Josh Shapiro, a Democrat and Harris's ally. Trump has continued with his criticism of the Ukrainian president on the campaign trail. He said on Monday that Zelensky wanted Harris to win the election. On Wednesday, he called the Eastern European nation dead and demolished. Now, Myanmar's military coup leaders have asked their opponent to put down their weapons and begin political dialogue in a surprise step that was swiftly rejected. The State Administration Council SAC, as the military has styled itself since seizing power in 2021 February, urged the ethnic groups and People's Defense Forces (PDF) fighting against military rule to give up what it described as the terrorist way and start political dialogue. The armed groups have taken control of swaths of the country since joining forces to launch a major offensive in October last year, putting the military under immense pressure. The National Unity Government (NUG), which includes elected lawmakers removed in the coup, swiftly dismissed the offer. Nefon Lat, NUG spokesperson, said it was not worth considering, according to report. The NUG formed the PDFs after the military crackdown on mass protests with brutal force. The Assistance Association for Political Prisoners, a monitoring group, says the military has killed at least 5,706 people since the coup and apprehended closely 21,000 people. United Nations investigators said last month that crimes against humanity and war crimes committed by the military had intensified at alarming rate. The generals who have claimed unsubstantiated fraud in the November 2020 election that returned Aung San Suu Kyi's National League for Democracy (NLD) to power have vowed to hold new elections. It framed the offer for talks as part of its efforts to organize the polls, noting a census was due to start on October 1st to ensure the accuracy of both the lists. It has not given a date for the polls, but in January 2023, it announced stringent French election laws that led to the exclusion of the NLD and dozens of other political parties. Aung San Suu Kyi has been sentenced to 27 years and following secret trials on charges widely seen as politically motivated. Civil society groups caution that the SAC's elections were a sham and will be no solution to the crisis caused by the coup. Myanmar was under military rule for decades after it secured independence from the United Kingdom in 1948. Those regimes also offered elections before continuing their crackdowns. Burma Campaign UK Director Mark Farmaner said the military was probably hoping that the current generation of diplomats didn't know that this is from their decades-old playbook and doesn't represent any kind of genuine change in approach. Talking climate crisis, officials in the United States of Florida are persuading residents to heed mandatory evacuation orders or face life-threatening conditions as the enormous Hurricane Elena advances across the Gulf of Mexico towards the United States. According to the Florida Highway Patrol, Hurricane Elena flooded parts of Mexico and has already brought tropical storm conditions to Florida, where one person was killed on Thursday evening after a sign fell on their car on a highway in Tampa amid violent winds and rain. Everyone along the Florida Big Bend coast is at risk of potentially catastrophic storm surge, the National Hurricane Center (NHC) said on social media. The NHC has upgraded Elena, which was anticipated to make landfall in Florida's Big Bend region at about 11 p.m. local time, to an extremely dangerous Category 4 with sustained winds near 130 miles per hour. NHC Director Mike Brennan said in a briefing, "We're expecting to see a storm surge inundation of 15 to 20 feet above ground level." Brennan said waves accompanying the hurricane's arrival can destroy houses, move cars, and that water level is going to rise very quickly. Driving rain has flooded roadways, closed schools and airports, and left around 698,700 homes and businesses without power in Florida, where a state of emergency has been declared. Florida state authorities are providing buses to evacuate people from the Big Bend area, home to almost 832,000 people, and taking them to shelters in the capital, Tallahassee. Over 55 million people in the U.S. have been placed under some form of weather alert from Hurricane Elena. States of emergency have also been declared in Georgia, North and South Carolina, Virginia, and Alabama, as the NHC cautioned that much of the Southeast could experience power outages, toppled trees, and intense flooding. In the southern Appalachian Mountains, the National Weather Service has cautioned the region could be hit with landslides and flooding not seen in over a century. According to Colorado State University hurricane researcher Phil Klotzbach said, according to reports, only 3 Gulf hurricanes since 1988, Irma in 2017, Wilma in 2005, and Opal in 1995, have been bigger than Elena's predicted size. Meanwhile, Shigeru Ishiba, former defense minister, will become Japan's new prime minister after winning his party's leadership contest on Friday, following a crowded race that ended in a runoff vote. The 67-year-old takes control of the long-ruling, scandal-plagued Liberal Democratic Party (LDP) and will assume command of the world's fourth-largest economy once Parliament convenes in October due to his party's majority in the lower house. He was one of 9 candidates and beat Economic Security Minister Sana Takaichi, who was contesting to become Japan's first woman leader in the runoff with 215 votes to 194. A third front-runner who didn't make the final cut was Shinjiro Koizumi, the U.S.-educated, charismatic son of popular former Prime Minister Junichiro Koizumi. It was Ishiba's 5th attempt to lead the party, a conservative political machine that has ruled Japan almost continuously since the party's founding in 1955. Ishiba has long been something of an outlier in a political culture that prizes conformity, willing to criticize and go against his own party. That willingness to speak out made him powerful enemies within the LDP, but endeared him to more grassroots members and the public. He sits on the more progressive wing of the Conservative Party. The political veteran has pledged a full exit from Japan's high inflation rates, promising to achieve growth in real wages. He also supports legislation that could let married women to keep their maiden names and has said Japan should lessen its dependence on nuclear energy in favor of renewables, and has called for an Asian version of the NATO security bloc to counter threats from China and North Korea. Ishiba will succeed outgoing Prime Minister Fumio Kishida, who announced in August that he will step down after just 1 term following a series of political scandals that triggered calls for him to resign. The LDP has in recent months been entangled in one of Japan's biggest political scandals in decades. 2 of the most influential factions in the LDP have been accused of failing to properly declare their income and expenditure, and in some instances allegedly rerouting political funds to lawmakers as kickbacks. Scandals surrounding several high-ranking officials haven't helped, with some accused of involvement with election law violations or of offensive past comments against minorities. Kishida had tried to contain the damage, replacing many cabinet ministers last year and abolishing his own party faction. As leader of the ruling party, Ishiba will be tasked with boosting the LDP's image ahead of general elections next year. He will also take the helm at a time of increasing living costs, which have exacerbated by the weak yen. With a U.S. presidential election in November, Ishiba will navigate Japanese ties with a new American leader amid rising security challenges in Asia, including an increasingly assertive China and belligerent North Korea. On more stories now, Zelensky delivers urgent in-person plea to Biden and Harris. Volodymyr Zelensky's Ukrainian president visit to the White House on Thursday may have been his last chance to convince a receptive American president of his country's war targets. And just weeks before a U.S. presidential poll that could have a profound effect on his country's future, Vice President Kamala Harris used the moment to draw a stark contrast between her and former President Donald Trump's approach to the conflict. The broad divide was the backdrop to Thursday's meetings at the White House. During an appearance alongside Zelensky, Harris suggested her Republican opponents will force Ukraine into yielding territory to its Russian invaders, falling in line with demands for President Vladimir Putin. While Harris did not specify who she was talking about, the implication was clear. And though Zelensky has sought to cultivate ties with Republicans, including Trump, during his visit to the United States, it was not lost on him or anyone watching that November's election is providing fresh urgency to his search for a way to position Ukraine for victory. On Thursday, Zelensky was in Washington to try and convince the Biden administration his country can still win its war with Russia so long as the United States and other nations significantly and quickly increase their military assistance. Trump, speaking on Thursday, said he will be meeting with the Ukrainian president in New York on Friday. Earlier on Thursday, Trump cryptically posted on Truth Social what appeared to be a private communication between the Ukrainian deputy ambassador and an aide to the former president asking to pass along a message from Zelensky requesting a meeting. Trump did not indicate in the post whether he will do so. Zelensky had been anticipated to depart the United States, but was prepared to stay an extra day to facilitate a meeting, according to a source familiar with his plan. The anticipated meeting comes after the Ukrainian president recently told the New Yorker that he believes Trump doesn't really know how to stop the war, even if he might think he knows how. In Africa, Sudan's army launches offensive to reclaim capital areas. According to a report on Thursday, Sudan's military launched artillery and airstrikes in the capital in its biggest operation to regain ground there since early in its 17-month war with the Rapid Support Forces, RSF. The push by the army, which lost control of most of the capital at the beginning of the conflict, came ahead of an address by its commander, General Abdel Fattah al-Burhan, at the United Nations General Assembly in New York later in the day. Witnesses reported heavy bombardments and clashes as army troops tried to cross bridges across the Nile, linking the three adjoining cities that make up the greater capital, Khartoum, Omdurman, and Bari. Army sources said their forces had crossed bridges in Khartoum and Bari. The RSF said, according to a report, it had thwarted the army's efforts to cross two bridges to Khartoum. Though the army earlier this year retook some ground in Omdurman, it depends mostly on artillery and airstrikes and has been unable to dislodge Nibo RSF ground forces embedded in other parts of the capital. The RSF has also continued to make advances in other parts of Sudan in recent months in a conflict that has caused a vast humanitarian crunch, displacing over 10 million people and driving parts of the country to extreme hunger or famine. Diplomatic efforts by the United States and other powers have faltered, with the army refusing to attend talks last month in Switzerland. This month, the battle for control of Al-Fashir, the capital of North Darfur state in the west of Sudan, has also deepened as the RSF has tried to advance from positions surrounding the city against the army and allied former rebel groups. Al-Fashir is the last army holdout across the Darfur region, where the United Nations and right groups say the RSF and allies have led ethnically targeted attacks and the humanitarian situation is particularly critical. The RSF has denied being behind the violence. The United Nations Human Rights Office said on Thursday it had documented summary executions, sexual and gender-based violence, and abductions of women and young men in Al-Fashir, in addition to rising civilian casualties. United Nations Human Rights Chief Volker Turk said, "From bitter past experience, if Al-Fashir falls, there is a high risk of ethnically targeted violations and abuses, including summary executions and sexual violence by the RSF and allied militia." The United Nations Security Council and Secretary General have also demanded an edge to the siege of Al-Fashir, home to over 1.8 million residents and displaced people. 21 children killed in Kenya school fire laid to rest. According to a report, a mass burial has been held for the 21 children who were killed in a boarding school fire in central Kenya earlier this month. Each small coffin was topped with a photograph, with most of the boys killed aged between 9 and 13. Grieving relatives and former classmates bid a solemn farewell on Thursday to the children. Dozens of children carrying floral wreaths led funeral processions for the boys from Hillside and Darasha Academy in Nyeri town, who were aged between 9 and 13. According to more reports, they were stuck in their dormitory as the blaze spread through the building on September 6th. According to the most recently available government data, Kenya has a sad history of school fires. There were over 60 cases of arson in public secondary schools in 2018. Vic's young souls, innocent young boys, Deputy Preston Rigathi Gachagao said at the service, "Our heart cries for them." It is not yet known what caused the blaze, but researchers say many similar fires have been set by students protesting harsh discipline and poor conditions. May their souls rest in peace. And now we take a quick break, and when we come back, I'll bring you stories from Nigeria. Please stay with us. You're welcome back, and now stories from Nigeria. Federal government starts paying new minimum wage to civil servants. The federal government has announced preparedness to start the new minimum wage payment to civil servants. This development was revealed by the spokesperson for the Office of the Accountant General of the Federation, Bawa Moka, on Thursday. He stated that employees under the federal government payroll can expect to receive notifications regarding their updated minimum wage salary payments from today. However, Moka did not clarify whether the minimum wage will be disbursed along with any other outstanding arrears. According to report, President Bola Ahmed Tinubu sanctioned a new minimum wage of 70,000 naira on July 18th, 2024. And finally on the news, oil gas sector owes federal government $6 billion US dollars and 66 billion naira native report. On Thursday, the Nigeria Extractive Industries Transparency Initiative (NATI) revealed that outstanding collectible revenues due to the federal government in the oil and gas industry as of June this year have increased to more than 6.07 billion US dollars and 66.4 billion naira. In a statement, Chris Ochunu, Assistant Director, Communications and Stakeholders Management, NATI noted that these figures were among vital information and data contained in NATI's 2022 and 2023 Independent Oil and Gas Industry Report released on Thursday in Abuja. A breakdown shows that the outstanding liabilities were 6.049 billion US dollars and 65.9 billion naira in unpaid royalties and gas flare penalties due to the Nigerian Upstream Petroleum Regulatory Commission as collectible revenues by August 31st, 2024, according to report. The report also provides a detailed analysis of the information and data regarding who owes what in outstanding revenues due to the government. Speaking at the public presentation of the report in Abuja, the Secretary of the Government of the Federation, Senator George Akume, reaffirmed the unwavering commitment of the federal government of Nigeria to the principles of the Extractive Industries Transparency Initiative (AT) being implemented in the country's oil and gas sector by NATI. Senator Akume, who also chairs the NATI board, acknowledged that information and data provided by NATI's independent reporters have consistently proven invaluable to the government. He said these reports have guided policy decisions, reforms and measures that foster accountability, particularly in the oil and gas sector, noting that in a sector where opacity could easily lead to leakages, inefficiencies and corruption, NATI has become an indispensable partner in ensuring that Nigerians are fully aware of how their Commonwealth is managed. A recap of major stories says Russia threatens nuclear action as Ukraine hits munitions. Trump to meet Zelensky after Harris pledges Ukraine support. Myanmar military urges anti-coup forces to surrender and join talks. One dead as extremely dangerous Hurricane Elena hits Florida. An ex-defense minister wins Japan's ruling party to be next prime minister. And that's all on the news. Thanks for watching. Have a great weekend ahead.